This evening, the hip-hop world of love is exploding. Fans can't stop talking about what is reportedly the most stunning leak in the franchise's history. And whispers have suddenly become roars. Allegedly, exposed tape CS, tape CF come. Too light. Tapes that have the potential to completely upend Yandy and Mendeecees' glitzy existence. And Kirk and Rasheeda are the ones at the heart of this storm. People claim that these two did more than just cast disparaging remarks. They also dropped bombs, revealing information that should never have been revealed. Social media is booming, and the streets air burning, and supporters are calling for clarification. Are these purported recordings authentic? Are they the final weapon being used by Kirk and Rasheeda in this never-ending battle on reality TV? There is no doubt that the entire love and hip-hop family is disturbed. Friendships are in shaky shape, and emotions are running high. Everyone's jaws are on the floor as we delve into the drama, the betrayal, and the shocking claims tonight. Hold on tight, because what we're going to discover may completely alter your preconceived notions. The tension and whispers in that packed room made the air feel heavier than ever before, as though the weight of treachery was in every word. And there was secret meaning in every glance shared. The people in attendance made an effort to remain calm, but their eyes betrayed them, wandering uneasily towards the conflict center, where mistrust and rage appeared to be brewing. It all started with a single statement that sliced like a razor through the cacophony. It's one of those unexpected comments that can't be undone once it's out. The room fell silent as soon as it was stated, as though the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. The people's features contorted in disbelief and incredulity. Others clutched their chests as if they had just been stabbed, while others covered their mouths. At first, the accused stood erect, his voice calm and frigid as he denied everything. However, their firmness was insufficient to dispel the uncertainty that had already crept into everyone's thoughts. The audience started to whisper more as they talked, wondering if this composure was evidence of their innocence or just the habitual ease of someone who has lied in the past. Whispers evolved into side chats, which in turn led to outright charges. The room gradually changed from a meeting place to a battleground, where quiet was just as hazardous as yelling, and words became weapons. At one point, someone who couldn't contain themselves smashed their fist down on the table and demanded the truth. Everyone became tense as the sound reverberated like thunder, their pulses pounding and their breaths coming in short gasps as they waited to see how far this altercation would go. The accused moved, their jaw tensing, their gaze sweeping over the features in front of them as if seeking out a single ally, but failing to find one. With every second that went by, the pain of each stare became deeper and deeper. The charge was no longer the only issue. It was now about trust, loyalty, and the hidden realities that had long been hidden behind handshakes and smiles. The room became electrified as the discussions became louder, igniting tension that was on the verge of erupting into mayhem. Trembling with anger, one voice rose over the others and accused not only the person in the center, but also those who had previously spoken up for them. The charges ignited long-standing animosities and reopened wounds that had never fully healed, spreading like wildfire. Those who had previously stood next to each other started accusing one another of being at fault. Memories of prior betrayals flooded back, causing hands to shake, voices to break, and tears to form. "This is not the first time such secrets have been hidden," someone yelled, with the weight of those words bearing down on them like a storm cloud ready to explode. The audience let out a collective gasp. All of a sudden, more than one person was being targeted. Everyone was caught up in a web of hidden truths and lies. Each thread became increasingly tight, threatening to choke them all. One person stood up in the middle of the commotion, urging that everyone pause and pay attention with a quiet yet firm voice. The shouting stopped, but the tension remained. Instead, as all eyes were fixed on the speaker, who claimed to know more than had already been made public, The quiet felt more acute and perilous. Every speaking pause was excruciatingly long, drawing every heart into a cadence of fear and expectation. When they finally spoke again, they divulged details so explicit, so damning that the audience shook with shock. As though shocked, many flinched and covered their ears to shut out the reality. Others, straining to hear every word, leaned closer, with their fists clenched and their lips quivering with rage. The accused tried to speak but was unable to come up with words that could reverse the harm that had already been done. The crowd were left reconsidering what they believed they understood as a result of the deep-dwelling insights that uncovered hidden motives and buried connections. Arguments broke out again, louder than ever, and every second seemed to drag on forever. The sound of voices breaking beneath the strain of sadness and rage. Someone urged reason in an attempt to quell the tempest. But the din of accusations and counter-accusations overpowered their remarks. As emotions erupted out of control and spilt into threats, obscenities, and vows of vengeance, the walls appeared to close in. The accused at last found their voice amid the confusion. However, what was shown was not denial. It was a rebellion. The room fell silent as their words pierced through the cacophony. The crowd were shaken to their very core by the audacity of their declaration, not because they believed it. According to them, this was only the starting, because the entire basis upon which everyone stood would be destroyed by the truth, not simply the reputation of one individual. Again, there were gasps, bodies shifting uncomfortably, and eyes darting anxiously as though they were waiting for the floor to give way. The tension was thick enough to choke on now, and it was intolerable. Every breath was an effort to combat the emotional tempest that threatened to destroy the space. The need to speak, to finally reveal the truths they had kept for so long, made those who had previously remained mute shudder, daring them to open their mouths and destroy everything. With a single sentence, the accused glared at them. The ensuing hush was deafening. There is a conflict every second between courage and fear, between revelation and quiet. One person broke at last. They revealed what they had seen long ago but had kept hidden out of fear in a trembling but determined voice. Their words were like lightning, shedding light on shadows that had long hidden so much. It was an instantaneous and explosive reaction. Others broke down in tears, while others screamed. Some even attempted to run away, believing that they may be saved by avoiding reality. The accused face twisted in desperation and rage as they realized that they had lost control and that the meticulously constructed mask they had worn for so long was coming apart in front of everyone. However, there was a hint in the accused's eyes that this was far from over, even as the mob surged once more, this time more violently and loudly. It was the expression of someone preparing their next move rather than one of defeat. A person who continued to keep cards near to their breast while anticipating the ideal time to retaliate. Every head turned, eyes widening in disbelief, as an unexpected figure entered the room just as it seemed like the night had reached its breaking point. Their presence alone was enough to calm the uproar, because this individual was not intended to be there, not to be aware of it, and not to come back at all. However, they were standing there with unreadable expressions, sending shivers down everyone's spine. As they waited for this newcomer to speak, the throng halted, their breaths trapped in their throats. What fresh information they would let go, and whose life would be the next to fall apart due to the truth. The voices kept rising, each statement more significant than the last, and the tension in the room became intolerable. Sierra's hands shook a little as she struggled to maintain her poise, and her face stiffened. The others sensed the storm coming, but no one dared to step in. Erica smirked as she leaned back, seemingly relishing every moment of the mayhem she had sparked. Yandy's breathing became erratic as her rage transformed into something more profound, akin to shame and betrayal. Mendeecees moved uneasily, his eyes darting maskwise and his mouth clenching. Under her breath, Erica laughed, relishing the scene as though it were her own triumph. The event was escalating more quickly than the producers had expected, so they urgently murmured behind the cameras, in an attempt to put himself between the two women before the situation got out of hand. Mendeecees eventually got up from his chair, but there was too much fire in their eyes. Sierra was too determined to let her wrath stop her from pushing on and stepping around him. She took Yandy's arm firmly enough to make her point, but not so hard as to cause pain. Do you wish to engage in some gaming? Then, when the truth is revealed, don't cry. Her voice trembled with anger as she hissed. Yandy shot back with a quivering voice and a twitch of her arm. I'm tired of individuals like you claiming to be able to define me. You have no idea what I have given up. The words lingered in the atmosphere, unvarnished and exposed, revealing a hint of suffering beneath the rage. Even stopped laughing for a second when she saw Yandy had given away more than she had meant to, and the room fell into startled quiet. Everyone was astonished when Sierra abruptly went for Yandy's wig and yanked it, breaking the stillness. Voices screamed and hands tried to tear them apart as the room exploded. Yandy stumbled, grabbing at her head and struggling to get her bearings. Her eyes were wide with shock. Every aspect, including the humiliation, imprinted on her face. The other's gasps and the look of rage that replaced her amazement was captured on camera. Mendeecees yelled for them to halt. Above the commotion, his voice boomed. But his appeal was overpowered by the scrape of chairs, the clamor of people trying to get in, and the agitated voices that would not stop. Rasheeda took Erica by the arm and told her to quit escalating the conflict. However, Erica merely smirked and dismissed her, taking pride in the fire she had started. Now shaking with anger and pain, Yandy rushed back towards Sierra, her fists clenched. She was barely restrained by the others. The unadulterated anger captured by the cameras elevated the room above reality TV drama. Do you believe this too? Be a game. Yandy's voice cracked as she cried. You're pulling me like that in front of everyone. Sierra fired back with similar vigor, her chest rising and falling quickly. The two women locked eyes, their bodies shaking with adrenaline, their breathing labored, neither of them prepared to back down. You've been playing games with me for months. Don't act innocent now. In an attempt to regain control of the scenario, the producers eventually intervened and demanded a break in a harsh and frantic voice. However, it was also late. Everyone in the room was aware that the harm had already been done. The room was in ruins as the turmoil subsided gradually, the atmosphere heavy with bitterness and unspoken words. Yandy tried to gather herself and sat down heavily, burying her face in her hands and trembling. Mendeecees put his hand on her shoulder and crouched next to her, mumbling something no one else could hear. On the opposite side of the room, Sierra was pacing back and forth like an animal in a cage, her rage still simmering beneath the surface. Erica leaned with her arms against the wall, crossed, her cocky grin reappearing as though she had triumphed in an unseen conflict. Rasheeda shook her head, her face displaying disappointment at the fight as much as at how swiftly everything had fallen apart. Knowing that this moment would become the focal point of everything, the cameras stayed focused and captured the aftermath. Rumors rapidly circulated among the cast and staff outside the room. Everyone added their own interpretation of the events that had just transpired. Even before the official film was made public, phones were ringing with calls and texts, and rumors were beginning to circulate beyond the walls. The tension had permeated every nook and cranny, sparking discussions that would only serve to stoke the fires. The only sound to break the still shocked silence within was the erratic breathing of those still in shock. Everyone was aware of one thing, but nobody knew what the next step would be. Everything had changed that night. The delicate balance of their world fell into turmoil as bonds were severed and trust was destroyed. And even though the yelling had ceased, the storm was still very much alive and well, looming like a shadow that may erupt anew at any time. After the startling blow that had fallen between them, there was a heavy quiet in the air. However, the silence was short-lived as rumors started to spread like wildfire throughout the set. Crew members looked at each other uneasily. The tension was thick enough to choke on, and the extras shifted anxiously. As she touched her cheek, Rasheeda's hand shook. She was reminded of what had just transpired by the little sting. She glanced around in the hopes that someone would intervene or at least recognize the seriousness of the situation. All she could see, though, were tentative eyes flitting from hers. Bendy stood motionless, panting, his face a whirl of uncontrollable emotions. He felt as though he had just lost a battle with himself as his chest rose and sank. No one had the audacity to shout cut, and the cameras continued to roll, documenting every moment of the mayhem. That implied that what transpired would finally be seen by the world in its unadulterated state. And although a part of Rasheeda feared the inevitable flood of criticism and conjecture that would follow, another part of her wanted the truth to be revealed. She was sufficiently familiar with the field to realize that scandals didn't simply destroy, they laid their reputations to rest. With a faltering but forceful voice, Rasheeda staggered back a step. "You consider yourself a man because of this? Do you believe this proves anything?" Her comments reverberated throughout the set, piercing the tense atmosphere with a mixture of anguish and defiance. Mendeecees returned a look, his lips squeezed into a narrow line, but his reply was overshadowed by his silence. The muttering became more intense, and at last one of the crew members ventured forward, moving gingerly. "Guys, perhaps we ought to take a vacation." His voice broke under the strain, revealing his own anxiety about what might occur next. Rasheeda, however, took out her phone before anyone could move. She went live despite her shaking hands because she was more determined than ever. Thousands of others joined in a matter of seconds, and before she could even comprehend it, their comments were streaming up the screen. Rasheeda turned the camera on herself, and her voice was raw with emotion, as the audience let out gasps, questions, and fury. "Do you guys believe that this drama is only staged? It's real, right here." They all just stood there while this man placed his hands on me in front of the cameras. Reactions poured in instantly. Some admirers wanted proof, while others were incredulous and incensed. Mendeecees was seen in the backdrop of the live video, his face tensing as he became aware that things were getting out of hand. In an attempt to hide his face from the phone, he extended out, but it was too late. Millions of screenshots had already been captured, and the story was rapidly gaining traction on social media. Rasheeda continued despite her voice cracking. "On this set, they want us to feel like family and that we support one another. However, see what transpires when the actual truth is captured on camera. Nobody speaks, nobody stops him. They would rather safeguard their valuable brand than a woman who is directly in front of them." The fact that those remarks were no longer solely about Mendeecees made them more impactful than the smack. The entire machine, the network, the producers, and the actors who had all looked on in silence became the focus of these. The hashtags calling for responsibility, boycotts, and justice exploded in the comment area. Now it was more than a fight. It was a movement now. Mendeecees finally lost it, trying to drown her out with a loud scream. You have no idea what you're discussing? You have no idea what I've endured or what I've been suppressing? Even though he was appealing and frantic, his remarks sounded like excuses to the live audience. Rasheeda sent him a sneer as she turned the phone on him. What then gives you the authority to touch me? What do you mean by that? Tell them. Tell the millions of people that are currently watching. For an instant, Mendeecees was unable to speak as the weight of her challenge hovered in the air. His mouth opened, then closed again, his thoughts intertwined in a knot he couldn't disentangle. The live audience was enthralled, with comments abounding, with requests for him to reply and provide an explanation. However, no confession could have been more incriminating than the silence that followed. Now, the producers hurried in after realizing that the situation had grew into something they were unable to control. They made an effort to calm Rasheeda down and get her to stop the live stream. However, she pushed their hands aside. Keep your hands off of me. Don't give me instructions. You all allowed this to occur. The world can now witness it. All of it. Mendeecees' anger erupted and his voice broke as he said, "You believe I'm the bad guy? You believe I'm scar-free? You never gave a damn about me, truth." Rasheeda remained unflinching. Then, without touching anyone else, speak your mind. You wish to be heard? All right. However, you can't go back once you've crossed a queue. Now the environment was too tense to tolerate. Every second seems to drag on forever. The audience were riveted to their televisions. Some were crying, some were furious, and some were just in awe of the savagery of what they were seeing. Additionally, as the producers scurried in the background attempting to find out how to rescue the show, it was evident that nothing would ever be the same again. The tone of the comment area darkened. It's not offensive to tag media outlets, blogs, or gossip pages and request coverage. It wasn't just a viral story. In a matter of minutes, it had taken over every platform. Real-time headlines were being written. Clips are shared indefinitely. Additionally, Rasheeda and Mendeecees were both caught in the middle of an uncontrollable storm. When one of the crew members eventually succeeded in grabbing the phone, the live stream immediately terminated. However, the harm was already done. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Rasheeda bounded off the set. Mendeecees, meanwhile, was motionless and gazing into the vacant area where she had recently been. His acts weighed heavily and oppressively on him. But rather than regret, there was bewilderment, rage, and anxiety about what might happen next. And neither of them could have predicted the magnitude of what was about to happen, silently. Rasheeda sat. The muted sound of the set outside her dressing room blended with the gentle hum of the lights above. She continued to gaze at her image in the mirror. She gripped her hands together tightly, as though she was trying to stop her thoughts from escaping. Once more, her phone buzzed. Kirk sent her another message, but she was afraid to open it. Her chest weighed heavily from everything that had happened over the last few days. She reflected on how rapidly things had gotten out of control, how her life had become an uncontrollable tempest due to the disputes, accusations, and unexpected outbursts. The shouting from earlier, the collision of words that had caught everyone's attention and made her feel vulnerable, was still echoed in her mind. No matter where she looked, she felt caught between sadness, rage, and betrayal. In another part of the structure, the cameras appeared to record every agonizing moment. Yandy was pacing back and forth while venting to a close friend on the phone in a low voice. Her hands continued to make erratic gestures as though the airite had to sense the intensity of her annoyance. She was amazed at how disorganized everything had become. How, in the span of what seemed like an instant, individuals she had once considered family could suddenly become foes. She struggled to decide whether to call out the mess her husband had caused or to defend him. Although the betrayal was deeply painful, her rage was made much more intense and nearly intolerable by the public's constant observation of her every action. The humiliation of being embarrassed and caught off guard in front of millions of people caused Yandy's voice to break as her buddy on the other end repeatedly pleaded with her to calm down. He was leaning against the wall outside the set, his head cocked back, his eyes closed as though he could blank out the world and erase the entire day. However, it wasn't that simple. Rasheeda's allegations were painful, and every word she had yelled at him was replayed in his head. He made an effort to persuade himself that he was in charge and that he hadn't allowed things to get out of hand. But he was plagued with reality. There was no denying the truth. He had allowed the moment to take over. And now he had to deal with the consequences. As they went by, crew members whispered, shook their heads, and took out their phones to text about what they had just seen. He could feel the weight of judgment bearing down on him. It was heavy in the air. Kirk was not hiding from anyone, however. He'd stormed out of the building earlier. He screamed at whoever could hear him, his voice still resonating in the parking lot. What transpired in front of the cameras was not the only thing that infuriated him. It concerned the years of stress, the pent-up anger, and the sense that, no matter what headed, it seemed that the cycle of exposure and betrayal would never stop. His hands shaking with anger, his chest heaving, he kicked the side of his car in fury. Beneath all the rage, though, was a profound sense of loss of void that constantly reminded him of the trust and affection that had been broken so long ago. Social media, meanwhile, was ablaze with responses. Videos of the event went viral more quickly than wildfire. Every second, fan pages republished and comments kept coming in. While some supporters condemned Rasheeda for being overly harsh, others supported her and commended her for her strength. Within minutes, Kane's name became viral, with half of the internet demanding answers and the other half resurrecting previous disputes to add to the confusion. The problem grew much larger than any of them could have imagined thanks to memes, reaction videos, and contentious discussions. It was no longer merely a fight. Their reputations were in danger of being completely destroyed by the full-fledged cultural storm that had developed. Rasheeda eventually got up from her seat within the set, breathing steadily but shallowly as she realized she could no longer remain silent. She took out her phone, pressed the live button, and hundreds of viewers poured into her stream in a matter of seconds. She spoke in a tremulous voice, her words unfiltered and piercing through the cacophony. She shared every detail, injury, and betrayal with her side. She fought back the tears that came to her eyes, using all of her remaining strength to keep herself together. She wanted her truth to be heard by everyone, altered, unedited, and free of producers' manipulation to boost ratings. She was unable to keep up with the rapid stream of comments. However, the support, the rage, and the love all encircled her, like a storm from which she was unable to break free. Gandhi's blood boiled when she saw the live person across town. As Rasheeda's remarks painted an image of her family as villains, she found it impossible to remain still. She picked up her own phone and began filming, her voice clear and her feelings exploding with each word. She also talked about being targeted when all she wanted was peace, about lies being propagated, and about betrayal. Her live broadcast soon attracted thousands of viewers as well, and it suddenly felt like a real-time digital conflict. Every remark feeds the fire. Every side draws lines. Fans found themselves torn between taking sides and making hashtag demands for more. When he eventually took up his phone, Mendeecees' pulse was pounding as he browsed through the confusion. Realizing how out of hand things had gotten, he considered giving Yandy a call, but what would he say? I felt empty when I apologized. It seemed too late to explain. In actuality, the harm had already been done regardless of what he did now. Incredulous at how swiftly personal suffering had become public amusement, Kirk also sat in his car and watched, clip after clip, The city seemed to be alive with the spirit of the scandal as the night wore on. Their names were on people's lips everywhere they went. Everyone was discussing restaurants, barbershops, and studios. No longer was the drama merely a headline, was the only important talk. And they all knew in their hearts that there was no turning back the clock. The ties that had bound them together were now broken. Furthermore, nothing could undo what had been said, done, and witnessed by the entire world. No matter how many excuses or explanations were offered, you just saw one of the most insane rides reality TV has ever given us: family. And to be honest, the reason people can't stop watching is precisely because of this kind of pandemonium. The arguments, the betrayals, the drama, and the tears. Every second seems to have the potential to alter everything for all parties. Here's the problem, though. It goes beyond what was shown on film. It's about the following step. What are your thoughts? At last, the truth will be revealed, or will there continue to be secrets? Is this the tipping point that could permanently destroy relationships and friendships? Or will they miraculously make it through another storm? Your opinions count, because these tales inspire discussions all around the world, in addition to being told on TV, and how this moment is remembered might be influenced by your speech. So let's work together on this. Tell us who you think was right, who you think went too far, and what you think will happen next in the comments section. If you were as surprised as we were, hit the like button. And believe me, the consequences of this are only getting started, so be sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss a single update, since there are still more surprises, drama, and twists to come. Let's be the first to know when the next wave of lunacy strikes. Turn on your alerts, because this story is far from over. If tonight has shown us anything, over at the bar.